And yeah, we wrote a book together. Mark, who are you?
Yeah, my name is Mark Hanau. I was born in 1967. And when punk broke out, I was skateboarding the streets of Blaricum, which is a rich suburb in the Netherlands. And how did I get involved in the hardcore and punk rock scene? Well, in het Gooi, where I used to live, there were maybe like 20 or 30 punk rockers, and we all knew each other, and we skateboarded and hung out and used drugs, whatever punk rockers do at the time. And every Thursday night, I went with my mom to the Albert Heijn, which is a grocery store. And back in the day, only on Thursday nights the stores were open, because in the Netherlands all the stores were closed at like 6. So I did groceries with my mom. And at that same Albert Heijn in Laren, a guy named Menno did also groceries with his dad. And Menno turned out to be the singer of Lerm. And being the only two punks in the supermarket, we started to chat with each other while our parents were doing groceries. And well, through Menno, I discovered Lerm. Lerm was a straight edge band. I thought doing drugs is sort of silly if you want to change the society you live in. And in the meanwhile, you lie drunk on the floor, passed out in the corner of a squad to see a band and not doing anything else. I thought it was too passive, so I turned straight edge. What about you, JP?
It's a bit different story. But when I was in elementary school, I had an older cousin who was babysitting me and my brother. And she was more into alternative music, and not necessarily hardcore punk, but more in the new wave style of music. And that's basically how I got in touch with alternative music. First it was like new wave bands, and later on, like an old friend made a mixtape for me. And on the one side, it was like the usual new wave band. On the flip side was my introduction to punk and hardcore. And that really appealed to me. And like the fast music and the aggressiveness, etc. So I got into it, and I started, at that time also started skateboarding, and through skateboarding friends, I found out that there was like a punk, and even a punk and local hardcore scene, and even a local straight edge band, and that's how it got started for me.
And we wrote a book on the entire European straight edge scene, and as we will tell you later, it's not an encyclopedia, because although it's like a very heavy book and very thick, it's 700 pages, we couldn't include everything that happened in European straight edge. But let me tell you what we think that straight edge is. For us, it's a reaction to early punk rock that was very destructive, and where drugs were causing a lot of problems in the scene. So for us, it's actually very easy. It's 4 principles: no alcohol, no drugs, no smoking, no casual sex. And that was really necessary in the early 80s, because punk was basically destroying itself with no future mentality. And the escape basically in what regular society was doing, escaping in drugs, smoking, alcohol and sex. And later in the late 80s, vegetarianism and veganism were added to straight edge, but that's not like, you cannot be straight edge if you're not vegan. That's not the cause. There's like no police, no punk police that will check that for you. For us, it's connected to hardcore and punk, because without being punk or hardcore, straight edge is just like being sober. It's like, wearing combat boots and never been to a metal show. And we wrote our book from this perspective, Rebellion Against the Rebels.
And from 2005 to 2008, Mark and I, and also Bigma, we were in a band called Birds of a Feather. And the Birds of a Feather was a straight edge band with members over 30 years old, which seemed to be ridiculous at that time. But suddenly, especially me, I was in a band with guys who had like a impressive resume, playing in bands like Betray and ManLiftingBanner and Mainstrike, which was really cool. But at the same time, we discovered the people coming to shows were younger than us, often like 10, 15 years younger. And it was like a different generation. And they often hardly knew the history of their European scene. And as a matter of fact, I think most of them knew the history of the US scene better. So for them, the path was already paved and the scene was there to discover, but there was no how to build your own scene necessary. So while we were in the van, like we did weekend trips, because at the time that we played in Birds of a Feather, we all had professional lives already, so we had to work 5 days a week. So oftentimes we did like weekend trips, and while we were in the van on the way to shows, we told each other stories about our past and how our shared history was slowly fading away. So in 2006 and 2007, when we worked on our LP, The Past, The Present, which was a concept record about 25 years of straight edge in Europe, we decided we had to write down those stories in a book. And remember, at the time, 2 decades ago, there were only books about punk and hardcore that dealt with the US or the UK maybe, but there were no books about Europe. Luckily, in the last decade, this changed because people like Helge Schreiber and Hans Verbeke, and Gabriel Kuhn as well, they have written books about our European scene.
So why did we write the book? Not because we were in a band and we're sitting in a van, but because we fucking lived that straight edge scene, and it was also fucking amazing. It was just unbelievable what happened between, let's say, 1988 and 2003, 2005. That was something that had to be documented. And we thought many people of the early days sort of disappeared out of the scene. Some of them passed away. So we wanted to speak to everyone that was still around. So what we basically did is we started to interview old friends, the people from Lerm, the people from Profound, ManLiftingBanner, the people from Mainstrike. And then we asked them who else we should talk to. So we talked to other people. And so we wrote the first version of the book that was with the LP of Birds of a Feather. But we missed a lot of people, so we decided to do a second version. And that second version we made 700 pages thick. We added a lot of people from Belgium because we had a small section of Belgium. So fortunately, we have Ujay and Cindy here at the table. Now we took it further from our friends to people that we knew but were not really our friends.
But it's also maybe interesting to tell the people who are listening is that we decided to have our LP, the LP from their Birds of a Feather record, accompanied by a book, just like those super cool LPs from Dead Kennedys and Cross from back in the days. You know, so we were really excited when the record came out because we had like a gatefold record with on one side a slab of vinyl, and on the other side was like a 12-inch shaped book about the straight edge, which was basically the first version of the book that we wrote afterwards. But when we got the LP, we were, of course, we were really excited, but at the same time, right away, we knew we could do better. Because of the deadline that we had with the record that came out, we were not able to track everybody down that we wanted to talk to. So that's definitely a minus. And second, people that we tracked down didn't respond because we got in touch with them via email. So some of them were like, probably thinking, a book, that's never going to happen. So there were definitely stories missing in the first version of the book. And thirdly, we were not disappointed with the quality and of the book itself. So those were all reasons for us to
start again.
Yes.
And we sort of kickstarted when the 8000 book was released in, I think, 2019, where we talked to Ujay and other people, and then we decided to make the new book. As I said, we started with our friends. So the backbone of the book are all Dutch bands. So we started with Lerm, followed with Profound and ManLiftingBanner, then Mainstrike, and after that we interviewed bands like Eye of Judgment, Reaching Forward, Vitamin X, and from all those Dutch bands we sort of spread out throughout Europe. Maybe you can tell the JP.
Yeah, basically I'll pick it up from the part when you talked about Mainstrike. Because basically we use the Dutch bands like Reaching Forward, Vitamin X, but also a Step Apart and Abusive Action, and our own band, Birds of a Feather, as stepping stones. But that's not all, because for each era, we added and interviewed people from all over Europe to make the story as complete and balanced as possible. We did over 100 interviews with people from all over Europe. So we had to make choices what and who to include. But with a continent as big as Europe, And starting from our own experiences, we could not cover all bands, and we could not talk about all the scenes or cover all the venues and fanzines. So the book that we wrote, like the second edition, will give you an insight into our personal experiences and will make you reflect on your own experience.
Yeah, and it's maybe good to say that we saw they did a time travel to Europe, and thanks to Corona or COVID, everybody all of a sudden was used to meeting each other online. So we were able to interview people online instead of, going to London or going to Germany. So we talked to people from Poland on one day, and we talked to people from the UK the other day. And we tried to cover all the scenes we knew at the time. So we ended up with Ian Leck from Northern England. We did Rome. We did Lisboa. We did Slides and Warsaw. And maybe a funny story about Slides is there was this guy, Marco Rabold, who was in Eastern Germany, and he had already discovered straight edge. And then I think in 1991, when the wall came officially down, the German government gave every Eastern German person 100 Deutschmark as a gift, as a welcome gift, like welcome, you're in the free world. And the first thing Marco Rabold from Slides back all the way back in Eastern Germany was that he took a train to former Western Germany, and the first thing he bought was a Gorilla Biscuits LP from that 100 Deutschmark he got from the government. So those funny stories are also in the book. Also about I think Patrick Bukowski from Poland, how they had to travel throughout Poland in a pre-internet time, and all they knew was there was a show in a town. So they traveled to the town and then asked people on the street, like, where's the show? Went through gardens, through bushes to find like a shed where there was a show, whilst wearing army boots. And at the time he was like 12, so the smallest size army boots were probably too big for his feet, so he looked like a clown, which I thought was very funny. We also interviewed later bands like Vitamin X and Reaching Forward, and of course No Way. Jorda is here from No Way, who was a band that probably started in like 2022 or something. So and he's like he could be my grandchild, but he is the child of Johnny. So we'll talk about him later. Come on, JP, prepare.
What else? What's else in the book? No. Actually, I wanted to go back to why we needed to document, why we felt the need to document what we had going on. Shall I do that?
Yeah.
Just a little bit. Because after Lerm stopped in 1988, Bart and Michiel, they started Profound together with the two Lerm brothers. And Paul and Olaf, of course. But when Bigma joined the band, they started playing as Cold Turkey, and later on they changed the name into ManLiftingBanner. And at the time that happened, the scene in Europe was really expanding, with bands like Rise Above and Crivets and Feeding the Fire, just to name a few. But also memorable shows like the one in Mol, where Gorilla Biscuits played and Youth of the Day played.
Nee, that was Aalst.
How was it?
Mol was all European bands.
Okay.
Was like Profound, or I think it was the first ManLiftingBanner show. And Betray and some other.
I remember. I'm confused with the Wattenscheid show, which was basically, in hindsight, the first European show with all straight edge bands.
Yes.
But a little bit later on, Cruise Response record from Germany had a really important role in shaping our scene, followed by other labels later on, like Good Life or Janet and Sobermind or Life Force Records. But as a result, bands started touring, and that was really interesting. A band like Onward, they came from Scandinavia, they toured the mainland, which was really cool. It was a really cool tour. And Spawn became known, from Germany, there was a band called Spawn. They became known because they put out a record on New Age Records in the US, and they even went to tour the US in 1996, which was for European bands at that time completely unheard of, unless you were refused, of course.
And touring in the US was always a great success, Bigma? And Johnny?
And Johnny. But But at that same time, in the 90s, concerts or festivals like Ieper Fests and Geleen Fests attracted hundreds of visitors. And straight edge got way more accepted and respected within the hardcore scene in general. So when ManLiftingBanner stopped, Bigma started Mainstrike, and in Belgium, the 8,000 scene was already started. And that's the 8,000, the postal code without the H. Because before 8,000, there was the 8,000 scene with bands like Love, Truth and Honesty, Spirit of Youth, Shortside and Blindfold. And later on, that transformed into 8,000 with bands like Concurrence and Liar, and the characteristic metalcore style that even, other bands from other countries started playing. Like, for example, Rancor from the Netherlands, they also were in that metal field. And at the same time in Sweden, there was Desperate Fight Records. So I used to do a fanzine, and through the fanzine I got in touch with Jose, who used to be the singer for a band called Abhinanda. And at that time, he just set up a record label together with Dennis from Refuse called Desperate Fight Records. And they had a very... there was like a huge scene, and there was a lot going on. Like, it's not that we were able to watch videos on YouTube at the time because there was no internet, but like by sending letters to each other's back and forth, we got pictures and we saw like the records that came out and the CDs they put out. It was amazing what they had going on. So it was
please wave your hand if you're still following him, or is he getting too detailed? They're still following you.
Thank you. All right, I shut up.
So basically, we stopped adding new stories to the book if we heard the story before. We heard people telling the same story from 2 or 3 sides, and we think we sort of covered the backbone of everything that happened. We paid attention to the most important shows. We paid attention to the most important like hotspots and venues, like the Kippenhok in Amersfoort, the Goudvishal in Arnhem, Cultuurcentrum in Slides, Ieper, of course, with the Fort and Vis, the Blitz in Oslo. And we paid a lot of attention to pivotal shows like what JP already said, Wattenscheid, Mol, Salzgitter, the last show of ManLiftingBanner, the Geleen Fests, the Ieper Fests. And also a very important time in the book is March 1989, where we'll talk about that a little bit later in the panel. So basically, that's what's in the book. The entire story of everything that was important in the European straight-edge hardcore scene, starting in 1977, going all the way to 2023. It's not an encyclopedia, despite the fact that it's like fucking huge. There's one guy in the audience. I don't know if he's still here. He was going to see Watch Terror. He's thinking that I think the only guy who will Klink that read the entire book, or are there other people that read the entire book? Well, thank you so much. Since it's not an encyclopedia and you think that there are things missing, go fuck yourself and write your own book. Thank you. Yeah, is your mic on? Ja. Oh, niet de groene. Nee.
Yeah. Check.
Yeah, check.
There it is. There it is. Okay. So I was one of the persons who read the entire book.
Whoa,
So yeah.
Woo.
And that's why they asked me to ask them some questions. So here we go. I really like all the stories in there. You know, it's from A to Z, and it's really big, as you said. It's also accessible for outsiders from outside the scene. So if you weren't there, you are still able to live it or relive it. Why did you choose to tell it like a story, the way it is?
That was sort of an easy decision for me, because I hate books like Burning Britain, where there's like I like Ian a lot and what he writes, Ian Glasper, but every chapter is about a band, and it always is like, okay, we were in high school, 2 of us were punk, we started a band, we asked 2 people from our class to join. They sucked, but nevertheless we recorded the 7-inch and we did some shows and then we broke up. I thought there was like a more interesting story to tell if you would follow the people from A to C. So I tried to make a story that's chronological, geographical, and thematical correct. But unfortunately, I didn't succeed because there was too much shit happening at one time on different places. So I really tried to make it an accessible story because I think that's more interesting to read.
Okay, thanks. Did you guys count the number of hours that you spent on this book?
Impossible.
No?
But it was a free time job.
Yeah.
I think it was 4,000 or so.
And thanks to Corona, by the way. Since we were stuck at home, you know, we had a lot of extra time to, and it was also, let me say, that this is a first, because it was really cool to talk to people via Google Meets or whatever, online meetings. So you saw each other face to face, and first of all, you catch up because you haven't talked to each other for like 20 or 25 or even longer. And then, you know, I mean, that's how the book came together, basically.
Okay, cool. About the way the book looks, because it looks great. So JP, this one is for you. How important was it for you to make it a design like this?
Now I have to be careful that I'm not going to be too detailed. But for me, it was important. I mean, when you, as a designer, you know that people like to see pictures. So you need to find a balance. If not, the pictures need to stand even out more than the text. So it has to, you know, appeal to actually read what you see. Yeah? But so that's one. And the second thing is that I try to look for something. It had to look minimalistic for as far as possible. But I wanted to make the connection between punk and design. So there is a reference to old school punk, which is the usage of color, and that combined with modern photography, I would say.
Yeah.
And I got to say, I mean, you did a great job. I'm not saying that because we did it together, but yeah, it really doesn't look like your typical hardcore or punk rock book. It's a great book to have and to experience.
Mm-hmm. And of course, there's also room for flyers and things like that. It's not all just text.
No. What I did, and I succeeded in doing that, is that the pictures that you see on the page is related to what you're reading on the page. So, and of course, at the end of every chapter, I put in some flyers from that era of time, as well as records. You know, like at the end of each chapter, there's like records that are also coming from whatever time we are talking about, you know. And you can also see from that, when the scene was on its peak. Because when in the first chapter, when there was alarm, there was hardly any records to display. But when you look at the mid-90s or the 90s in general, I had to restrict to only one spread because I could do like 5, you know. But I mean, that's when you can tell by just reading the book that when the scene in Europe was at its peak.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know designers a little bit from my work. I'm sure that there are a lot of things that you, in hindsight, would have liked to do differently, or not?
At this point, not really. Maybe the cover.
Okay, and why is that?
I don't know. It became sort of a logo, you know, in the end. And I was since it's like a long name, like we decided to name the book. We could not do any better. I had to come up with something that stands out, but also, I don't know. It's not temporary, but I think it is. But what I still do like is the relation between the cover and the spine of the book.
Oh yeah. So, are there people that you did not interview, and do you feel like you missed something, or is it what you just said?
Well, I think it's very important to say that some people passed away, so we couldn't speak to them directly. We spoke to their friends, like for instance, Peter Amdam from Norway. He is sincerely missed, and he also misses in the book. There's one guy, another Peter, that didn't want to cooperate. The enigma of Peter Huren from Germany, who said like, no, I'm not going to cooperate. I think that's like a big flaw in the book, because there's a lot of people that talk about him and he played such an important role with his label Crucial Response. And he's not in the book, but he was just so adamant not being interviewed, it's just a shame. But if someone can persuade Peter Hoeren, will make an addendum on the book with his interview, because I mean, he's a great guy, but for this he was just a pain in the ass. And there are some people that we deliberately didn't interview because they were assholes. So buy the book, read it, and look who you're missing, and you know which people we thought were assholes.
It was also important to know, aside from what Mark is all saying right here, I don't fully agree, but the people that we interviewed over 100 people, and those people, they tell the story. They tell a story how we lived, experienced it. So even if you are not in the book, you can relate to it from your own experience, and that's, I think, good to know.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just looking at Uj if he knows who we didn't interview. Oh, I think he knows.
So, and then there was the release party, which was pretty fun. And then people started to read it, and you got some reactions. What were those reactions?
Unfortunately, we didn't get any reactions at all. We are still waiting for people to give us constructive feedback, and especially people telling us what they don't like.
That's not entirely true. We got only a few reactions, less than we expected. Some people read the book and said it was great. I learned a lot. There was one guy, I thought it was awesome, a guy from Germany who said, like, I didn't know the guy, and he came up to me at a show and he said, hey, you wrote a book about my life, thank you. And I'd never met the guy, and it was just great that I struck that chord in him. And then there were 2 or 3 people who were pissed that they weren't interviewed, or that they were interviewed and their story was too boring to be in the book. So please, we have about 20 copies left that we're selling tonight. After that, it's done. But please buy the book and give us feedback, because we're really dying for feedback. Also, if you hate the book, please let us know.
So if you don't have many left, will there be a reprint, or is this something that people should get now or never again?
When we started working on the book, we already thought that through. And we would love to reprint the book, but unfortunately, it's the paper and the printing costs went out of the roof, so we cannot afford. You need to know, we finance the book ourselves, and we cannot afford to do like a second print run. But yes, initially we already thought it through for a second, a third, and a fourth pressing, and by changing the color, the neon colors on the book. But until now, there's only going to be a Russian version of the book, and that's about it.
So if you speak Russian, you can get the second print.
And if there is investors in this room right now, and you think like, I want to put out this book, or I can help you financially, talk to us.
Okay, now for the investor pitch deck, or not? No.
I'll do the elevator lift sometime.
Okay, last one. Which topic is your next book going to be about?
Oh man, I'm never going to write a book again. I don't have the time. This was a nail in my coffin.
I'm going back to making fanzines.
But actually, I'm thinking of writing a book on Dutch punk, but not like Burning Britain, but interviewing some of the real oldies, the people that are now in their 70s, to get like the stories of Dutch punk changing into hardcore. Because I think been a lot has been written on Dutch punk, but not on the conversion to hardcore and to bands like Lerm, BGK, Pandemonium, those kind of bands.
Yeah, there's enough to document there. Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you, David. We're going to go to the panel. Please give a small round of applause to our guests, Jorda, Johnny, Bigma, Uj, Cindy, and Walter. We have one mic for the 3 on each side. So I'm going to start with Bigma, and then I'm going to switch to Walter. Bigma, my first question is, Where were you in March 1989, and why is that important?
It's important to me. I was in Belgium, in Aalst. And the funny thing why it's important to me is that when I grow up, I always was a little too late. I was in the young age already into punk rock, but when I was old enough to go to shows, all those scenes were already gone. And after a while I picked up on the whole straight edge scene, but I was still the only one in my, in my city,
village?
In my village. And then it's funny because UJ asked me when we met, and actually we met in Belgium, '89, to see Youth of Today. And I was really into Youth of Today, and the cool thing was, for the first time I was in a time where everything was happening, so it unfolded around me. And it was also the first time when I went to shows, it was just me in my It's Okay Not to Drink shirt, surrounded by mohawks, and it was like a dangerous environment to be at shows as a straight edge punk. But being in Belgium, and we arrived at the train station, and UJ was there, Hans from Lier, Saskia, and it was the first time I met people who dressed the same like me, what we copied from Youth of Today and that whole youth crew thing, but that's a different story. But it's the first time I felt like, whoa, I'm part of that great scene. And then seeing Youth of Today was the best show I ever been to in my life. So that's basically it, I think.
So, Walter, you provided him the best show he had been in his life. How was that for you? Because you were young at the time, maybe as old as Bigma. You came to Europe for the first time. You came with Youth Today and Lethal Aggression. We'll forget about Lethal Aggression. For my expectation, because I also went to that same show in Aalst. It was the first time I saw you play. Europe was not like a warm bath for you. Can you please tell us something about what happened in the month before Bigma saw you?
Well, I don't particularly. There were so many places coming to Europe that I'd never heard of before that we were playing. So like Aalst is one of those places I didn't know that it existed, and it was amazing to me that there were so many people in the scene that would come out, and it wasn't all straight edge kids, as you were saying. It was a lot of punk people. And there was a sort of a vanguard of people that I could identify as like really kind of knowing what was happening in like in the U.S. with like with Youth Today and that kind of hardcore stuff that was coming out of New York at the time. But I thought. I guess if you're saying that it wasn't a warm bath, I was really just amazed that we could come over to play in this place that I had never heard of and have such an awesome reaction. You know, to me it was, and I think the band was really very much based on confrontation. So the people that weren't into it, that was part of the program really. So it wasn't. We weren't looking to arrive. We didn't expect anything else, to be honest. And but there was like a vanguard of people that we could tell were into it, and then there was like a sort of mass of there was these sort of like punks and squatters and things for us that were more politically minded, than we were used to in the United States. And I just thought it was all so cool, and being like, just being in a foreign country and being around all these people that were interested in stuff that I was interested in, and that there was this connection we were making was really, really exciting for me.
Yeah, I think I sort of relate to Bigma in saying that it was the first show where he met like-minded people. I was from Amsterdam. I had a little bit more like-minded people around me than you in Apeldoorn. But I remember, for me, it was like a pivotal moment because I met a lot of people that I just had written letters to. People from Belgium that were there. At the Aalst show, there were people from Germany. There were people from France that I had never met. I just wrote letters with them. And then you guys were there that I never met. But I mean, you were Youth of Today. You were like, you know, so. So for me, it was like really pivotal. And the week afterwards, where you guys played the Netherlands and there were a lot of people coming, I thought it was just amazing. And then you guys disappeared to the UK and then go back to... and I think I flew that summer to the US to be with Jordan Cooper, but I was about to stay with your brother Dylan, I think. And then I ended up with Jordan, whatever. But you came back in August or maybe September of 1989 with Gorilla Biscuits, who's playing tonight. Give Gorilla Biscuits, please, a hand. They're still around. So, did you see a change between like March 89 and September 89?
Oh yeah, it was a very big and obvious change. I mean, the singer of Youth Today, Ray Capo, really had a really strong. He's a great speaker, and I think he really the energy of the show and the people that were into what we were doing. I just felt like we were doing something that that people weren't expecting, and were kind of like, you know. I just felt like it kind of was opening people's minds. And, you know, the same, I wasn't an original member of Youth Today. So when I first saw Youth Today, it had the same effect on me. So coming back like 6 months later, it was like the fashion changed. Like people were like dressing more like, you know, rolled up jeans and basketball sneakers, and you know, the kind of the kit got a little bit more sharp, and just that everyone, you know, when we came to the Europe and in the Netherlands, the scene which was really really cool and supported by the sort of the squat scene. You know, on the one hand the squat scene, and on the other hand, you know, the sort of government-sponsored youth centers. So you had these sort of like these two different hands, which in the United States we only just had like, it wasn't so structured like that. But the people in the squats were like not really going to be down with straight edge for the most part. You know, not everybody, but a lot. Some, you know, quite a few did jump in. So I felt like that was a threat to that scene, and less so in the youth center kind of thing. So coming back, it just seemed like a lot of the people that were kind of looking for something to, you know, maybe it was just the scene was a bit stagnant, I think maybe. And Youth Today came with like a real program and a way of a philosophy, a kind of way of looking, a way of you know, and really good mosh parts, and that kind of like activated everybody from the one tour to the next tour. And you know, and on me personally, the first trip that I was describing before, you know, that all had a big effect on me as well, because you know, I was coming back to these places and seeing that change, and also just, you know, when I had been in Europe, you know, the whole political context of it was just very different from the United States, and that also kind of entered my my psyche in a big way. So it was like an exchange, you know.
Let's go to UJ here, because UJ, you're a metalhead, and I was just so happy that when the scene was like being shred apart by metal in the late 80s, and there were bands like Youth Today and Gorilla Biscuits who had like zero metal. I loved them. But you were a metal kid, and still you were in the scene. You were at the Youth Today shows, you were at the Gorilla Biscuit shows. How was that for you?
For me, it was more about losing interest in the metal scene, because it was all about drinking and stuff like that. And music was also becoming boring. And I found the energy back in the hardcore. So at first we had in Belgium the 8000 crew, which was more emo, and that was also not what I wanted. And I met Josh from Congress and Liar. So I asked him if he wanted to start a band like the style of Integrity, Ironside, that was Ringworm, that was our influences. And we created our own sound. But then I got back to the metal scene, and I'm still metalhead, punk rock, whatever, oi, name it.
What happened to your hair in all those years?
Yeah. More hair than brains.
Yeah, I think so.
So, when you do today play with an attitude adjustment, yes, lethal aggression.
Yeah,
Did you go for lethal aggression or you do today at the time?
both.
Okay.
Both. I saw them in Bielefeld, AGZ or something, and that was amazing because that place was like held back with wooden panels that went from one side to the other. We arrived there in the afternoon, and they still had to clean the place because it was still dirty from the gig before. They were like, "Oh, do we have a show tonight?" Yeah, but Lethal Aggression was for me amazing. Youth of the Day was even better. That was like with 4 people from Belgium, we drove through there, and we were like hooked. And then we saw him in London, we saw him twice in Belgium, in Holland. We went everywhere. We were lucky to see the 2 shows with Project X.
So I want to get back
Do
to
you
you.
remember the Namur show?
Was that, which show was that? What,
First one you played with Project X.
Um,
The fight started. Because
yes,
the
that
people-
was a very interesting day. We played. I think what these guys are talking about, when Youth Today first came to Europe, we were on a tour from our record label, and it was matched with this band Lethal Aggression, who were like,
Drugcore.
yeah, they were wasteland core from New Jersey, which was like the absolute polar opposite of what we were. Straight edge from New York, all clean and brushed teeth, and these guys were just like in the swamps coming out and just like all metal and kind of, you know, crappy in a way. But they were really fucking good, and we like toured with them the whole time, but it couldn't have been a starker contrast. So, but one day, I think it was in Belgium, and then another show in Holland within the same day. And the first show was in the afternoon, and somehow, like a straight up, like the only time I've really experienced this, where like a whole like riot kind of broke out, where somebody, I think maybe the singer Ray, like had some issue with some sort of like metalhead guy in the audience, and then someone punched somebody, and then everyone was punching everyone. And it was, you know, it must have looked so crazy. Like, if I could be like, see the video footage of all these like, you know, teenagers like punching each other over like a metal.
Awesome. It was fucking awesome.
Yeah.
That was Aalst.
The
second show.
So then we got out of that fucking nutty thing, and then we had a second show that night, and like, oh, that was so crazy, guys. So then we drove to the show at night, and we arrived there, and it was in Belgium.
Southern Holland.
Okay, sorry, in Holland.
Den Bosch.
Okay, so and it was at some sort of like pub kind of place. It's small, and the singer of Youth Today had a shaved head. So on the poster, you know, it's just this guy with a shaved head. And I think for that reason, a lot of the kind of like squatter kind of people, like more leftist punk people, were very suspicious of us. And I think by the same token, some of the right-wing people in the European scene thought like, oh, we got this band's probably cool. They're probably fascists or something. So we drove after the riot to this other place in Den Bosch, and we got there, and it was the sickest thing. All these guys were like in their like, they seemed really fucking old, like grown men, like in their mid-20s, and they had swastika tattoos. One guy had a swastika tattoo on his neck. And it was really fucking scary. I had never seen like real European Nazis before. And they were at our show, and we have all these songs that are like anti-racist and that were going to obviously upset these guys. And back then we just went from a fucking riot, like we were going to get our asses kicked by these Nazi men. And it was really one of the coolest shows we ever played, because Ray, who was our leader, just went straight up into their faces and just gave the most direct, like sort of speeches on why racism was fucked up and to totally clear up any confusion right to these Nazis' faces. And I don't know how we survived that one, you know?
Well,
it was the metalheads we had to really worry about.
Well, I was at that show too.
Yes, maybe you have a better memory of it.
Well, I was on the train back to Utrecht in Amsterdam with that whole bunch of Nazis, and I was still like, I'm here on my own. I don't know if I like this train ride that much, but nothing really happened. You were at that show too, Bigma. Speaking about a program, huh? I mean, what Walter said about having a program with youth today, you ended up in ManLiftingBanner. You guys had a program. Can you tell me what that program was and how that evolved to Mainstrike?
Yeah, well, that was more Michiel and Bart, their program. They went from this super straight edge into politics, and they evolved into communist straight edge, if you can call it that. But it was never my agenda, really. I was about change and changing all the wrongs in society and the world, but they really had a program of pushing socialism into the scene. But I like them in any way because I like extreme stances. And not that I want to play guitar for Screwdriver, for example, because they are extreme. But for myself, it was okay to play guitar for them. But after that, and seeing the scene involved in, everybody wanted to play like metal, and I really missed, when I first became into straight edge, the whole 88 sound, like all those Revelation records. And at that time, I thought there's no band like that. But I thought, okay, I can do it myself, because that is the hardcore mentality, do things yourself. And I found people who are also into that, and that's involved into Mainstrike, basically. If that answers your question.
Well, so why did you start Mainstrike? Just because you wanted to get that 1988 sound back and that full-on straight edge?
Yeah, basically because I missed bands like that, and that was the whole energy I loved about hardcore bands. You know, the whole positive thing, and not like at that time the scene was really into politics. The scene was like kind of dying, and I missed that uplifting message. Straight edge, to work on yourself, the real change in yourself, and with that in mind, change the world. And that was, I wanted also in my lyrics to express.
And Cindy, you got, maybe you can grab that mic. You were active in that same period as Bigma is speaking about, eh? You did a fanzine, you did a lot of photographs. How come we didn't use any of your photographs in our book?
I wasn't really taking pictures yet then. I was doing Animal Truth.
Yes.
Animal Truth was an animal rights organization that I just started myself with my friend Anne. And we wanted to inform all the people about vegetarianism and animal rights. That was also used a lot in the songs in the hardcore scene. I was also straight edge. And me and Anne, we were vegan. And we noticed you cannot easily find information because there was no internet. So we started to make the fanzine, put info stands at every hardcore show. We were like the Animal Truth girls. We started to organize shows, we did debates. We even went to schools and started talking with the kids and youth centers. We made t-shirts, stickers, patches, and we always donated the money to animal rights organizations or like animal shelters that were doing really well for the animals and not kill them. So that was where I was active in that scene. And I don't know why I'm not in that book, no.
So JP, do you want to ask a question about for Cindy about cooking food at the Geleen Fests?
I don't necessarily want to ask a question, but I remember at the time that you were doing the fanzine, Animal Truth with Anne, you also started, you slowly rolled into making vegetarian and vegan food for touring bands, eh?
Yeah.
And then one time we also invited you over to the Geleen Fest. And that was a really dangerous situation. Do you remember where you were cooking in that kitchen? I mean, it was like an old farm building.
Yeah, I remember.
And on the inside there was like this office space where we opened the doors and you were standing there making the burgers and all the food for all the visitors. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
Because I heard that was like a really dangerous, rickety frying pan, and everybody should be sort of pleased that they got out alive.
And everybody smelled like the fat.
In hindsight, I mean, this is something you cannot do nowadays.
No.
That what we pulled off there, and it was, of course, it was. I mean, the food was good and everybody enjoyed it, but it was
fucking dangerous. But fucking amazing.
We used to do a lot of dangerous things.
Yeah. We used to fight Nazis at Youth of Today shows. I mean, that's not happening anymore. But also, JP, about Geleen Fest, can you talk a little bit more about the first Geleen Fest you did? Because I think that's also interesting how that got around.
Yeah. That evolved from organizing shows with my old friend Ferry. Of course, we were inspired by what the people in Belgium had going on at Ieper Fest, but it was in the summer, so we decided to pull the same trick and do a festival in the winter time of the year, February and March. And for the first edition of the festival, it was basically like us financing the book. You know, like there was no money involved at all, so we just took the risk and invited bands from all over Europe to come to play.
Didn't you have Mainstrike playing as well in the first edition?
Mainstrike played every edition, right? Yes.
Almost every edition.
Which one you didn't?
I don't know when Eyeball played.
And you fought with bands, wasn't it?
There was something going on. But that was Jonas, our guitar player.
Okay.
But what I really liked to come back on the Geleen Fest was at the first two editions, the mix of people who attended and the friendly environment it was. It was political people with animal rights stands, but there was Hare Krishna peoples and everybody got along. That's what I really remember and what I liked about the Geleen Fest.
Well, what I like in particular about the Geleen Fest is because after months of preparation, you know, like we got kind of nervous a couple of days prior to the fest. So when we arrived on Saturday at the festival place, the parking lot was packed with people from the east in Trabants. And that moment, I remember me and Ferry looking at each other. We were like, okay, this is really cool. We're going to pull it off here today.
Yeah, but there was really a meeting place of people all out of Europe. And that's also with the same, with the first Ieper Fest also.
Yes.
And it was not as big as this. I mean, 500 people?
Yes.
Yeah. And everybody knew each other. People from Italy, Spain.
Yeah, the UK.
And that was really, really great.
I want to go to father and son here, Johnny and Jorda, which I think is amazing that we have a father and a son both playing in hardcore bands. Johnny, how did you end up in Mainstrike? Because before that you were just playing like shitty emo bands, weren't you?
Yeah, I played in an emo band with some friends that I grew up with, and I remember going to the first Mainstrike show. We wanted to see Unbroken, Battery, but I also was really into Mainstrike because I loved the old Youth Crew sound. So I was a bit I missed all these bands when they were playing.
So how did you end up being the second bass player for?
Yeah, the first left, and I think I was one of the only straight edge bass players around. So they had to do it with me.
And I remember Johnny as being this crazy guy. When we played, he was like everywhere, jumping, stage diving. So, yeah, we had. And I remember Beertje took you into the band.
Yeah, we were friends with Beertje from Coalition Records. So I think he called me probably. And then he asked you and he was like, oh, that's the guy he has also a Krishna beat. So, it's okay. He can join.
But you basically did the same thing as Bigma did when he left ManLiftingBanner. He started Mainstrike. When you left Mainstrike, you started Reaching Forward.
Yeah, well, Reaching Forward was already playing. And,
okay.
Jeroen, Beertje and me, we were We wanted to have our own crippled youth. So they didn't have any driving licenses, so we would rent a van and throw them inside, and we would drive them to all these shows, and we booked the shows for them, give them a lot of cola, and then they would jump on stage and play their songs. So when the singer left, I asked them if I could sing for them, because I really wanted to sing in a youth crew band.
Okay. Did your dad give you a lot of cola as well, Jorda?
Yes.
And did that help?
Yeah.
Because you're in a band called No Way, which I think is the youngest straight edge band from the Netherlands. First of all, why aren't you rebelling against your father?
Because I agree with the straight edge stuff, and I also like hardcore. So.
But he was really young. He didn't want to listen to hardcore, so to annoy me, he bought 2 classical records, like when he was 7 or something. So he was like, "Fuck you with your music," and he had like this classical music.
It's probably better composed than Reaching Forward and Mainstrike together.
Yeah, I think so. But then I was like, "Hey, you're skateboarding." Like he was like 8 or something. If you're skateboarding, you have to listen to this. This is suicidal tendencies. You throw this other stuff away and listen to this. And he was like, okay, this is good.
So Jorda, how is that for you? If you hear these stories of like groundbreaking tours and people like making way for animal rights, finding that energy, how is that for young people now?
Well, I'm not really. There's not really going on right now in the straight edge scene. So I'm kind of. I think it's. Sorry.
Ja?
Wat is jammer in het Engels?
Wat? Okay, we're having some language problems here. What do you want to say? Say it in Dutch.
Ik vind het jammer dat er niet echt meer straight edge bands zijn nu. Dat is ook een beetje...
Yeah, Jorda is saying, I think it's a pity that there's not a lot of straight edge bands in the Netherlands anymore. I think that's a pity too. But you're carrying the baton as a straight edge band.
We try our best to have like more straight edge bands, but it's not really working till now.
I want to say that the last band picture in our book is a picture of Jorda's band, No Way. I think it's great that there's young people taking over. Thank you. Taking over the struggle for straight edge. We have to come to a close. I'm looking around in the panel if there's any last words, because not everybody had as much time. Sorry. Any last words? Any final thoughts that you want to give to the audience? Because else I give them. I want to give you 2 thoughts. We brought this record from our friend Antoine. Antoine is a cancer survivor, and he is in a band called Ride on Time. He made this 12-inch, and all the proceeds of the 12-inch will go to No Guts, No Glory. It's a song called Cancer from one of his bands, and it's covered by his band and 6 other people. So if you want to donate to a good cause, come to our booth and buy the record. We have still, I think, 16 or 18 copies left of this book. So if you want to get your copy, you might get it today, because as you heard, there will be no reprint unless you talk Russian or read Russian, because there will be a Russian version of the book. I would like to thank our panel, and I want you to give them a big hand of applause to Walter Trifles, Cindy Vrij, Uj, JP, Jorda, Johnny, Bigma, David, and Roy. Dankjewel. Have lots of fun on Revolution Calling. Thank you for being here. Bye-bye. Keep hardcore alive. Go vegan.